The Holbrook estate always looked calm at dawn. Too calm. The kind of calm that felt rehearsed. Jonathan Holbrook watched the sun push weak light across the trimmed hedges as his car rolled up the long gravel drive. The tires crunched softly, the only sound breaking the early morning stillness. He loosened his tie but didn't take it off. He never did until he was inside. The tie was a reminder that control didn't end just because the day was over. The house came into view, massive, pale stone, perfectly symmetrical. Every window dark. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was the silence. Normally, by the time he arrived, the house would already be awake. A door would open. Someone would greet him. Footsteps. Voices. Movement. Proof that the place was alive. This morning there was nothing. The driver stepped out and opened Jonathan's door. Jonathan paused before getting out, scanning the front of the house. No lights flicked on. No one approached. Strange, the driver muttered. Jonathan said nothing. He stepped onto the stone driveway and adjusted his jacket. The air smelled damp, sharp with morning cold. He climbed the front steps himself, each footstep echoing louder than it should have. When he reached the door, it opened suddenly. Jonathan stopped short. A young woman stood there, blocking the entrance. She was black, early 20s, wearing a Navy maid's uniform that looked borrowed rather than owned. The fabric hung slightly loose on her shoulders. Her hair was pulled back but not neatly. Strands clung to her forehead as if she'd been running her hands through it all night. Her eyes locked onto his. Not with excitement. Not with fear exactly. With urgency. "Sir," she said. Her voice shook just enough to be noticeable, but she didn't look away. Jonathan frowned. "Yes." She swallowed, then forced the words out like she'd been holding them in for hours. "My mother didn't return after the night shift, sir." The sentence landed heavier than it should have. Jonathan blinked. The words didn't fit the setting. They didn't belong here on these steps in front of this house. "I'm sorry," he said. "What do you mean?" She drew in a slow breath, steadying herself. Her hands were clenched at her sides. "She works here. Night housekeeping. She finishes at 5 every morning. She always comes home." Her jaw tightened. Today she didn't. Jonathan looked past her into the house. The foyer lights were on. That alone was wrong. Staff never left them on unless someone important was expected. And yet no one else was there. No supervisor. No security guard. No familiar movement from the halls. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked. "Lena Williams." Her voice sounded stronger when she said it, like reminding herself she was a real person and not just a problem standing in his doorway. "And your mother?" "Denise Williams." Something faint stirred in Jonathan's memory. A name on payroll. A signature on reports he rarely read closely. "How long has she worked here?" he asked. 6 years, Lena said. "She doesn't miss shifts. She doesn't leave without telling someone. She doesn't disappear." The last word cracked despite her effort. Jonathan glanced at his watch. Just after 6. Too early for panic, some might say. Too early to assume the worst. But Jonathan had built an empire by knowing when things were wrong before anyone else admitted it. "Has anyone contacted the police?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "The supervisor said to wait. Said maybe she forgot to log out. But my mother doesn't forget things like that." Her eyes searched his face, looking for something: permission, authority, help. Jonathan exhaled slowly. "Come inside," he said. She hesitated for a half-second, then stepped aside. As Jonathan crossed the threshold, the house felt different. Not dangerous. Not yet. But unsettled. Like a place that had been disturbed and was trying to pretend it hadn't. He noticed small things right away. A chair pulled slightly away from the wall. Shoes near the staircase that didn't belong there. A faint hum from a hallway where lights should have been off. Lena stayed close, as if afraid the house might swallow her if she didn't. She was assigned to clean a section she'd never cleaned before, Lena said quietly as they stood in the foyer. Jonathan turned to her. Which section? The West Wing. The words tightened something in his chest. That wing has been closed, Jonathan said carefully. That's what she told me, Lena replied. She said it felt wrong. Jonathan looked down the hall leading deeper into the house. The silence pressed in harder now, no longer neutral. He reached for his phone, intending to call security. No signal. Not even that, he thought. Behind him, Lena shifted her weight, bracing herself. Sir, she said softly, I know I'm just staff. But my mother didn't come home. And something about this place feels off. Jonathan lowered the phone and met her eyes. For the first time that morning he felt it too. And if you're listening right now, leaning into this moment with us, you might want to stay close. Stories like this don't unfold the way you expect. If you haven't already, quietly subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. And if you're watching from somewhere far away as dawn breaks there too, you're not alone here. Jonathan took a step toward the dark hallway. Show me where she was last assigned, he said. Lena nodded and led the way. Neither of them noticed the faint scuff mark on the marble floor just beyond the archway. Not yet. Lena walked ahead of Jonathan, her steps careful, almost measured, as if the house might react badly to sudden movement. The hallway lights flicked on automatically as they passed, one by one, illuminating portraits Jonathan hadn't looked at in years. Faces of men who had built fortunes, stared down from the walls with quiet confidence. Lena didn't look at them. She kept her eyes forward. My mother started nights because it was quieter, she said, her voice low but steady. She said people show who they really are when they think no one's watching. Jonathan followed a few steps behind, listening. The marble floor felt colder here. The air carried a faint smell of cleaning solution mixed with something older. Dust maybe. Or something sealed away too long. You live nearby? He asked. Yes. 10 minutes away. She walks sometimes. Takes the bus when she's tired. Lena paused. I called her at 5:30. It went straight to voicemail. That's when I knew. Jonathan nodded. He didn't interrupt. He had learned long ago that people told more when you let silence do the work. They reached the service corridor. It was narrower, less polished, designed for movement without attention. Lena stopped in front of a door marked staff logs. This is where she signs out, she said. The clipboard hung crookedly on the wall. Jonathan stepped closer and scanned the page. Names, times, neat handwriting. Denise Williams, 5:02 a.m. Jonathan frowned. She signed out. Lena's shoulders stiffened. She wouldn't sign out and stay. That doesn't make sense. Unless someone signed for her, Jonathan said. Lena looked at him sharply. Who would do that? He didn't answer. They continued down the corridor. The hum of the ventilation system grew louder, then quieter again, like breathing. Jonathan noticed that one of the security cameras had been turned slightly toward the wall. That camera, he said. Lena followed his gaze. It was pointing down the hall yesterday. Jonathan reached up and adjusted it. The red indicator light was off. Power's been cut, he said. Lena's voice dropped. On purpose. Jonathan didn't respond right away. His jaw tightened. They passed a cleaning closet. The door was open. Inside, shelves stood half empty. Supplies missing. Her cart? Lena said suddenly. Jonathan looked up. At the far end of the corridor, near the entrance to the West Wing, a cleaning cart sat abandoned. Bottles neatly arranged. Mop leaning against the side. Gloves placed carefully on top. Too carefully. Lena took a step forward, then stopped. She never leaves it like that, she whispered. She hates mess. Jonathan approached the cart slowly. He crouched, examining the floor beneath it. The marble reflected light too cleanly in some places, too dull in others. That's when he saw it. A faint streak. Long, uneven. Not dirt. Not water. Jonathan stood. Lena, he said, keeping his voice controlled. Stay here. She ignored him and walked forward anyway. Her eyes followed his gaze to the floor. She stared at the mark for a long moment, then shook her head as if trying to clear it. "No," she said. "No, no, no." She backed away, pressing a hand over her mouth. "That could be anything," she said quickly. "It could be a spill. Or—" "It's not a spill," Jonathan said quietly. The corridor felt smaller now, the air heavier. Lena's breathing grew shallow. She leaned against the wall, grounding herself. "My mother told me something last night," she said suddenly. "She called me during her break." Jonathan turned to her. "What did she say?" "She said she was cleaning rooms that didn't make sense. Rooms with no furniture, no windows, just wires, screens. She joked that it felt like a bad movie." Lena laughed once, sharp and hollow. "She told me if she didn't come home I should make noise." Jonathan's chest tightened. "Did she say who assigned her there?" he asked. Lena shook her head. "She said the instruction was already in the system, logged before she even arrived." Jonathan pulled out his phone again. Still no signal. "This house doesn't lose signal," he muttered. Lena looked at him. "You sound like this surprises you." Jonathan met her gaze. "It does." They stood there, the silence stretching between them, until footsteps echoed from the main hall. A man appeared, middle-aged, dressed in a supervisor's jacket, his expression guarded. "There you are," he said to Jonathan, forcing a smile. "Sir, we didn't expect you so early." Jonathan didn't return the smile. "Where were you?" "Handling a staffing issue," the man replied quickly. His eyes flicked to Lena. "This situation has been misunderstood." Lena straightened. "My mother is missing." The man's jaw tightened. "We don't have evidence of that." Jonathan stepped forward, his voice calm but sharp. "Then explain the disabled cameras. Explain the false sign-out. Explain why a closed wing was accessed without my knowledge." The man hesitated. Just for a second. It was enough. Jonathan saw fear flash across his face before it was buried under professionalism. "I think," Jonathan said slowly, "it's time we stop waiting." Lena's hands curled into fists. And somewhere deep in the west wing, a door creaked softly, as if something or someone had just shifted. The supervisor cleared his throat, the sound sharp in the narrow corridor. "Sir, with respect, we don't have confirmation that anyone is missing. Employees leave. Phones die. People panic." Lena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "My mother doesn't panic. She plans. She prepares. She leaves notes on the fridge telling me which leftovers to eat first." The man avoided her eyes. Jonathan watched him closely. The stiffness in his shoulders. The way his fingers kept adjusting his sleeve again and again. "What's your name?" Jonathan asked. "Gregory Hill," the supervisor replied. "I oversee night operations." "How long have you been in that role?" Jonathan asked. 3 years. Jonathan nodded slowly. "Then you'll know Denise Williams. 6 years on staff. Never late. Never absent." Hill hesitated. "She's reliable." "That's not an answer," Lena snapped. Jonathan raised a hand, not to silence her, but to steady the moment. "Mr. Hill, I want a full log of last night's assignments. Printed. Now." Hill shifted his weight. "That may take some time." "The system?" "Now," Jonathan repeated. Hill nodded and walked away quickly, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Lena watched him disappear, her jaw clenched so tight it trembled. "He knows something," she said. "Yes," Jonathan replied. "He does." They moved into a small break room just off the corridor. The fluorescent light flickered faintly overhead. A half-empty coffee cup sat on the counter, cold and untouched. "My mother trained me to read rooms," Lena said quietly. "She said rich houses hide things better, but they always leave traces." Jonathan leaned against the counter. "She sounds perceptive." "She was careful," Lena corrected. "There's a difference." She paced the small room, then stopped abruptly. I should have come last night. You didn't know, Jonathan said. I felt it, she insisted. She sounded tired. Not normal tired. Careful tired. Jonathan said nothing. He thought of the West Wing. The sealed rooms. The things his father had insisted were temporary measures. What do you do here? Jonathan asked. I clean guest rooms, Lena replied. Day shifts. I needed the job. My mom said it would be safer than nights. She scoffed softly. Guess she was wrong. A faint buzz sounded from Jonathan's phone. One bar of signal appeared, then vanished. That's strange, Lena said. Phones usually work fine near the kitchen. They do, Jonathan replied. They stepped back into the corridor just as Hill returned, holding a stack of papers. His hands shook slightly as he passed them over. Jonathan scanned the pages. Assignments, time stamps, authorizations. This access code, Jonathan said, tapping a line with his finger. It shouldn't be active. Hill swallowed. It was reactivated automatically. By whom? Jonathan asked. The system, Hill said quickly. Jonathan looked up. The system doesn't make decisions on its own. Hill opened his mouth, then closed it again. Lena leaned forward. Who told you to send her to the West Wing? Hill's face reddened. I didn't send her. The task was already there. Jonathan folded the papers neatly. Then someone with higher clearance did. The silence that followed felt heavier than shouting. Sir, Hill said carefully, I suggest we let this go through proper channels. Jonathan's eyes hardened. This is my house. Hill nodded, but his expression said something else. Fear. Not of Jonathan, but of something beyond him. Footsteps echoed again. 2 security guards appeared at the end of the hall. Not the usual morning shift. Jonathan recognized neither of them. Who are they? He asked. Hill hesitated. Temporary contractors. Jonathan smiled thinly. You don't hire temporary security without my approval. One of the guards shifted, his hand brushing his belt. The gesture was subtle, but Lena noticed. She took a step closer to Jonathan without realizing it. This conversation is over, Jonathan said calmly. Mr. Hill, you're suspended pending investigation. Hill's eyes widened. Sir. Now. Hill backed away, nodding stiffly, and disappeared down the corridor. Jonathan turned to the guards. You can leave. They didn't move. Lena's heart began to pound. She could hear it in her ears. Jonathan met their eyes. I said leave. After a long moment, one of them nodded, and they walked away, their footsteps too quiet for comfort. Lena exhaled shakily. That didn't feel normal. No, Jonathan said. It didn't. He looked back toward the West Wing entrance. The abandoned cleaning cart sat there like a question no one wanted to answer. My mother told me something else, Lena said softly. Jonathan turned to her. She said if anyone ever asked her to clean rooms without windows again, it meant something was wrong. She said those rooms weren't meant to be seen. Jonathan felt a chill run through him. And she went anyway, he said. Lena nodded, tears finally slipping free. Because she needed the money. Because she trusted the job. Jonathan clenched his jaw. This isn't a waiting situation anymore, he said. We're calling the police. Lena wiped her face. Good. Jonathan started toward the main hall, then paused. From the West Wing, a faint sound drifted out. Not footsteps. Not voices. A low mechanical hum, steady and deliberate. Lena froze. What is that? She whispered. Jonathan didn't answer. Because whatever was still running back there hadn't been meant to be discovered. The police arrived just after 8. By then the house had fully woken up, but it didn't feel more alive. It felt watched. Staff moved quietly, avoiding the West Wing corridor as if it were marked off with invisible tape. No one asked questions out loud. They didn't need to. Fear had a way of spreading without language. 2 patrol cars pulled into the drive. Not unmarked. Not discreet. Neighbors would notice. Jonathan didn't care. The officers introduced themselves politely, their eyes flicking around the estate with a mix of professionalism and discomfort. Large homes always did that to people. Too many doors. Too many places for something to go wrong. Lena stood beside Jonathan in the foyer as they explained. She spoke calmly, carefully, like someone afraid that emotion would be used against her. My mother worked the night shift, she said. She signed out but she never came home. Her cleaning cart was abandoned. The cameras in her work area were disabled. One officer nodded, jotting notes. Any history of mental health issues? Substance use? Family conflicts? Lena stiffened. No. Jonathan watched her jaw tighten. He stepped in. Denise Williams has 6 years of employment records, he said. Perfect attendance. No write-ups. No absences. The officer looked up. People can surprise you. Jonathan smiled thinly. Not this way. They walked the West Wing together. The officers exchanged glances as soon as they crossed the threshold. The temperature dropped noticeably. The air felt stale, like it had been recycled too many times. This area's been closed? One officer asked. Yes, Jonathan replied. It shouldn't have been accessed. They examined the cleaning cart, the disabled camera, the faint drag mark on the floor. One officer crouched, squinting. Could be equipment marks. Could be, Jonathan agreed. But Lena saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe that. They asked for security footage. Jonathan directed them to the control room. That's where the story began to unravel. The recordings from midnight to 5 a.m. were gone. Not corrupted. Not glitched. Deleted. The officer leaned back in his chair. That's unusual. Jonathan crossed his arms. That system logs every access. Unless someone with admin clearance intervened, the officer said. Jonathan said nothing. The police finished their sweep with practiced efficiency. They took photos. They bagged Denise's gloves. They wrote reports. And then just like that, they were done. We'll file a missing persons report, the officer said gently to Lena. But there's no evidence of a crime. Lena stared at him. My mother vanished inside a locked house. The officer held her gaze. Adults are allowed to leave. Jonathan watched the words land. He saw the moment Lena realized what this was going to be. Waiting. Silence. Excuses. The patrol cars left. The house felt emptier after that. Jonathan dismissed non-essential staff for the day. He ordered the West Wing sealed again. Officially for maintenance. Unofficially to keep people from asking questions. Lena stayed. You don't have to, Jonathan told her. I'm not leaving, she said. Not without her. He didn't argue. The hours dragged. Jonathan took calls in his office, but his attention kept drifting. He replayed the hum Lena had heard. The deleted footage. The active clearance code. He'd buried those systems years ago. Or thought he had. At dusk, he went to his private study. The one room no staff entered. He locked the door behind him and stood in front of a paneled wall. For a long moment he hesitated. Then he pressed a hidden latch. The panel slid open, revealing a safe. Inside were folders marked with neutral labels. Property surveys. Old contracts. And one folder thinner than the rest. Jonathan pulled it out and sat heavily at his desk. The documents inside were old but not outdated. Surveillance diagrams. Authorization chains. Psychological profiling summaries. His father's handwriting stared back at him from the margins. Temporary, it read. Necessary. Jonathan closed his eyes. Down the hall, Lena wandered the staff quarters, unable to sit still. She noticed things now she hadn't before. A door that stuck. A light that flickered near the West Wing entrance. And the hum. It was faint. Barely there. But once she noticed it, she couldn't ignore it. She followed the sound until it stopped abruptly. Too abruptly. She froze. From somewhere deep inside the sealed wing, something moved. Not loudly. Not enough to raise alarms. Just enough to be noticed by someone who wasn't supposed to be listening. Lena backed away slowly, her heart pounding. At the same moment, Jonathan looked up from the folder in his hands. Because one of the authorization codes listed there was still active. And it wasn't his. Jonathan didn't remember standing up from his chair. One moment, he was staring at the authorization codes in his father's handwriting. The next, he was on his feet, the folder clenched so tightly in his hand that the edges bent. An active code. Not just active, recently used. He checked the timestamp again, hoping he'd misread it. He hadn't. Someone had accessed the West Wing systems less than 12 hours ago. Jonathan locked the folder back into the safe, slid the panel shut, and stood there for a beat longer than necessary. The study felt smaller now. The walls closer. The silence louder. He left the room and headed down the hall. Lena was sitting on a bench near the service stairs when he found her. She looked up immediately as if she'd been expecting him. Her eyes were tired but alert. "Wired? You hear it too," she said before he could speak. Jonathan stopped. "Hear what?" "The hum," she replied. "It comes and goes. Like machines breathing." Jonathan exhaled slowly. "You followed it." She nodded. "I didn't cross into the wing. But it stopped when I got close." "That wasn't a coincidence," he said. They stood there, the distance between them shrinking, not physically but in understanding. This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. It wasn't negligence or confusion. It was intent. "Why would someone keep it running?" Lena asked. "If it's closed, if it's supposed to be gone?" Jonathan hesitated. He had avoided this conversation since the morning, choosing silence over confession. "Because shutting it down completely would leave a trail," he said finally. "Some systems don't disappear. They just go quiet." Lena searched his face. "You know what was in there?" "Yes." "And my mother saw it?" "Yes." The words settled heavily between them. Jonathan motioned for her to follow him. They walked toward the West Wing entrance, stopping just short of the sealed doors. The security panel blinked faintly, a soft green light pulsing like a heartbeat. "This wing wasn't built for comfort," Jonathan said. "It was built for observation." Lena crossed her arms. "Observation of what?" "People," he replied. "Behavior. Reactions. Pressure points." She shook her head. "You're saying my mother cleaned a surveillance bunker." "I'm saying she cleaned rooms that were never meant to be cleaned by someone with a conscience." Lena's voice dropped. "Then why didn't she walk away?" Jonathan didn't answer immediately. He thought of the way Lena had described her mother. Careful. Reliable. Needing the money. "Because the job was already assigned," he said. "And because people like Denise believe in finishing what they start." Lena laughed bitterly. "That belief might get her killed." Jonathan's phone buzzed suddenly. One bar of signal flickered to life. A message came through. "Unknown number. Stop asking questions." Jonathan stared at the screen. Lena saw his expression. "What?" He showed her the phone. Her face hardened. "That's not a warning. That's a threat." "Yes," Jonathan said. "And it means we're close." They didn't hear the footsteps at first. A soft scuff behind them. Jonathan turned just as a man stepped out of the shadows near the wing entrance. Middle-aged. Well-dressed. Not staff. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but his eyes were sharp. "I wouldn't stand there too long," the man said pleasantly. "Sensitive area." Jonathan felt a surge of anger. "Who are you?" The man smiled. "Someone cleaning up loose ends?" Lena's hands curled into fists. "Where is my mother?" The man looked at her, genuinely studying her for the first time. Something like irritation flickered across his face. "She saw something she wasn't supposed to," he said. "That complicates things." Jonathan stepped forward. "You don't get to decide that." The man chuckled softly. "You really think this house belongs to you the way you think it does?" He glanced at the West Wing door, then back at Jonathan. "Your father understood the value of silence," he said. "You should too." Then he turned and walked away, disappearing down a side corridor before either of them could react. Lena's breathing came fast. "You knew him?" Jonathan nodded slowly. "Yes." "From where?" Jonathan's voice was low. "From a part of my father's life he claimed was over." The hum started again, louder this time. Jonathan stared at the sealed doors. "If he's here," he said, "then Denise isn't missing by accident." Lena swallowed hard. "Then what happens to people who know too much?" Jonathan didn't answer. Because the West Wing lights flickered on. One by one. The lights in the West Wing didn't blaze on all at once. They came alive slowly, section by section, like a body waking up after years of forced sleep. Lena took an instinctive step back. "That shouldn't be happening." "No," Jonathan said. "It shouldn't." The sealed doors hummed softly as power surged through them. The security panel blinked faster now, green shifting to amber. Jonathan felt the weight of the moment settle in his chest. Someone wasn't just watching them. Someone was responding. He moved first, positioning himself slightly in front of Lena without thinking about it. It wasn't heroic. It was reflex. "We shouldn't be here," Lena said quietly. "I know. And we're staying anyway." "Yes." They stood there listening. The hum deepened, vibrating faintly through the floor. Jonathan imagined cables warming, servers spinning up, systems syncing after dormancy. Systems designed to record, track, and store. "Why now?" Lena asked. "Why turn it on when the police just left?" Jonathan's jaw tightened. "Because someone realized we wouldn't drop it." Footsteps echoed again. This time they didn't come from behind. They came from inside the West Wing. The doors slid open a few inches with a controlled mechanical sigh. Cold air spilled into the corridor, carrying a metallic scent that stung Jonathan's nose. A figure appeared in the gap. A woman in scrubs, her badge turned inward, her face drawn and tired. "You shouldn't be here," she said flatly. Lena stepped forward. "Where is my mother?" The woman hesitated. Her eyes flicked to Jonathan, then back to Lena. "She's alive," she said quietly. Lena's knees nearly gave out. Jonathan reached out, steadying her by the arm. "Where?" Jonathan demanded. The woman swallowed. "Not here." She was moved. "By whom?" Lena asked. The woman's shoulders sagged. "I don't know names. Only instructions." Jonathan studied her. The fear in her posture wasn't the fear of being caught. It was the fear of being blamed. "Did you see her?" he asked. "Yes," the woman said. She was disoriented. She hid her head. She kept asking why the rooms had no windows. Lena closed her eyes, breathing through the surge of emotion. "Why didn't you report this?" Jonathan asked. The woman laughed bitterly. "Reported to who?" The West Wing lights flickered again. The woman flinched. "They told me if I spoke," she said, "I'd lose my license. Maybe more." Jonathan nodded slowly. "You're speaking now." She met his gaze. "Because this place is waking up. And when it does, people like me get crushed." A sharp beep sounded from the security panel. "Access denied" flashed in red. Jonathan stepped closer. "Who controls it now?" The woman shook her head. "Not you." Lena's voice cut through the tension. "Then who?" Before the woman could answer, a loud click echoed down the hall. The doors slammed shut, locking them out. The hum stopped. Sudden silence rushed in, heavy and disorienting. The woman stared at the doors, her face pale. "They're resetting." Jonathan's phone buzzed again. "Unknown number. This is your last warning." Lena's voice trembled with anger. "They're playing with us." Jonathan typed a reply with deliberate calm. "Jonathan, you already crossed a line." The reply came almost instantly. "Unknown number, so did she." Jonathan's grip tightened on the phone. Lena saw the message. Her voice dropped to a whisper. They mean my mother. Jonathan nodded. Yes. Then we don't wait, Lena said. We don't ask permission. Jonathan looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something shift. She wasn't just afraid anymore. She was determined. I'm calling someone, he said. Off the books. Someone who can find her? Someone who owes me, Jonathan replied. As he stepped away to make the call, Lena stared at the sealed doors, her reflection faintly visible in the polished surface. For a moment she thought she saw movement behind the glass. A shadow. Watching. And wherever Denise Williams had been taken, whoever controlled the West Wing now knew one thing for certain. They were no longer alone. Jonathan made the call from the far end of the corridor, his voice low, controlled, the way it became when decisions turned irreversible. Lena couldn't hear the words, only the tone. It wasn't pleading. It wasn't commanding either. It was transactional. She stayed by the West Wing doors, arms folded tight around herself, eyes fixed on the smooth surface that refused to give anything back. The reflection staring at her looked older than it had that morning. Sharper. Like fear had burned away something soft. She kept thinking about her mother's gloves. Folded neatly. Like she planned to come back for them. Lena. She turned. Jonathan was walking toward her again, phone already back in his pocket. He'll start looking immediately, he said. No official channels. No reports. Can he find her? Lena asked. Jonathan hesitated just long enough to tell the truth without saying it outright. If she's being hidden, yes. If she's being moved, it gets harder. Lena nodded. She appreciated the honesty even when it hurt. A cart rattled somewhere down the hall. A housekeeper passed the corridor entrance, glanced toward the West Wing and quickly looked away. Word was spreading. Not details. Just unease. What happens now? Lena asked. Jonathan looked around, then lowered his voice. Now we wait for information. And we prepare for resistance. From who? She asked. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. His gaze drifted toward the ceiling, toward the places where cameras once lived. From the past, he said finally. They moved to a smaller sitting room nearby, one rarely used. Jonathan closed the door, a subtle but deliberate choice. The room smelled faintly of old leather and lemon polish. A fire crackled softly in the hearth, left burning from the night before. Lena sat on the edge of a chair, unable to relax. Jonathan poured water from a crystal decanter and handed her a glass. Drink, he said. Slowly. She obeyed, her hands shaking. I keep replaying her last call, Lena said. Every word. Every pause. Jonathan sat across from her. What stood out? She asked me if I was happy, Lena said. Out of nowhere. She never asks that. She always asks if I ate. Jonathan listened, saying nothing. And then she said some doors aren't meant to be opened twice. Jonathan's eyes darkened. She understood more than she realized. Lena laughed softly, bitter. She cleaned houses for a living. People think that means invisible. But you hear things when you're invisible. Jonathan nodded. My father relied on that. The words slipped out before he could stop them. Lena looked up. Relied on what? Jonathan inhaled slowly. People underestimate service staff. They assume loyalty comes from necessity. Silence comes from fear. And it worked, Lena said. For a long time, Jonathan replied. A knock sounded at the door. Sure. Controlled. Jonathan stood. Stay here. He opened the door to find one of the security contractors, the same one from earlier. The man didn't meet his eyes. Sir, the guard said. There's been a delivery. Jonathan frowned. I didn't authorize. It's addressed to you, the guard said quickly. No return name. Jonathan took the envelope. It was thick. Heavy. The guard left without another word. Jonathan closed the door and stared at the envelope for a moment, then slid a finger beneath the seal. Inside was a flash drive. And a single folded sheet of paper. Lena leaned forward. What is it? Jonathan unfolded the paper and read silently. His expression hardened. What does it say? Lena pressed. Jonathan handed it to her. You're asking the wrong questions. Look where she was told not to clean. Lena's stomach dropped. They want us to go back in. They want us to understand what she saw, Jonathan said. He plugged the flash drive into his laptop. The screen flickered, then filled with grainy footage. Not security camera angles. Something else. Screens. Dozens of them. Rooms without windows. Faces caught mid-expression. People speaking, unaware they were being watched. Lena covered her mouth. This is illegal. Yes, Jonathan said. And worse. The footage jumped. Timestamps changed. One frame froze on a familiar hallway. The West Wing. And then, movement. A figure entered the frame. A woman in a maid's uniform. Lena leaned closer, heart pounding. The image sharpened just enough. It was her mother. Alive. Alert. Looking directly at the camera. She knew, Lena whispered. Jonathan's phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Now you see why silence matters. The video cut abruptly to black. The room felt suddenly too quiet. Lena looked up at Jonathan, her voice barely steady. She saw everything. That's why they took her. Jonathan closed the laptop slowly. Yes. And now they've shown us, Lena said. On purpose. Jonathan met her gaze. Because they're deciding whether we're a problem. Somewhere deep inside the house, the hum started again. This time it didn't fade. The police came back that afternoon, but the house no longer felt like a place of help. Felt like a stage. Jonathan stood near the foyer windows as the familiar patrol cars rolled up the drive again. Same department. Different posture. The officers moved more cautiously this time, their eyes sharper, their steps slower. Something about the earlier call had unsettled them, even if they hadn't said it out loud. Lena stayed a few feet behind Jonathan, arms crossed tightly, her shoulders squared. She had cried already. Quietly. In a bathroom no one used. She wasn't going to do it again in front of strangers. The lead officer cleared his throat. We need to ask a few follow-up questions. Jonathan nodded. Of course. They gathered in the study. The same room where wealth was supposed to feel reassuring. Today it didn't. We reviewed the missing persons report, the officer said. Still no confirmed evidence of foul play. Lena couldn't stop herself. You saw the cameras were deleted. Yes, the officer replied carefully. That suggests tampering. But it doesn't tell us by whom. Jonathan leaned forward slightly. You're saying someone erased footage inside my home, and that's not enough to escalate? The officer's jaw tightened. Sir, we have to follow procedure. Procedure doesn't erase footage, Jonathan said. The officer ignored the comment and turned to Lena. Ms. Williams, has your mother ever expressed fear about her job? Lena's hands clenched. She expressed caution. That's not the same thing. Any disagreements with coworkers? No. Any romantic involvement we should know about? Lena stared at him. Are you serious? Jonathan raised a hand again, this time firmer. This line of questioning isn't helpful. The officer shifted in his seat. We're trying to establish motive. Motive for what? Jonathan asked. Leaving her gloves behind? The silence that followed was uncomfortable. We'll keep investigating, the officer said finally. But until there's evidence of a crime, there's only so much we can do. Lena felt something inside her snap, not loudly, not dramatically. Just enough to change her forever. So you're done, she said. For now, the officer replied. They stood to leave. As the officers walked out, one of them lingered near the door. He glanced back at Jonathan, then at Lena. Off the record, he said quietly, houses like this, things get buried. Jonathan met his gaze. Not this time. The door closed behind them. The silence afterward was worse than the questions. They're not coming back, Lena said flatly. Jonathan didn't argue. No. He poured himself a drink he didn't want and didn't touch it. The image of Denise on the screen replayed in his mind. Alert. Where? Looking straight into the lens. They showed us that footage because they think we'll stop, Lena said. Because we'll be scared. Jonathan looked at her. Are you? She considered the question honestly. Yes. But I'm more afraid of what happens if we do nothing. Jonathan nodded. That's what they miscalculate. His phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't an unknown number. Private investigator, found something. Not good. We need to talk in person. Jonathan typed back a single word. Where? A response came seconds later. Private investigator, not on your property. Jonathan exhaled slowly. We're being watched, he said. Lena didn't ask how he knew. She already felt it. The subtle awareness that the house no longer belonged to them. That even the quiet corners were listening. Then we leave, she said. Yes, Jonathan replied. Briefly. They moved quickly. Jonathan instructed staff that he'd be gone for the evening. No explanations. No details. Lena grabbed her jacket from the quarters she'd barely used. As they walked toward the side exit, Lena slowed. This feels wrong, she said softly. Like walking away. Jonathan stopped and turned to her. We're not walking away. We're stepping outside the frame. They exited through the garage, Jonathan driving himself this time. No driver. No escort. The gates opened smoothly, almost too smoothly. As they pulled onto the road, Lena looked back at the house. For a moment she thought she saw a light flicker in the west wing. Or maybe she just wanted to. Jonathan drove in silence, taking routes that didn't make sense unless you were trying to be unpredictable. They reached a quiet diner just off the highway. One of those places that smelled like coffee and grease and didn't ask questions. They took a booth in the back. The private investigator arrived 10 minutes later. He slid into the seat across from them, his expression tight. She wasn't just taken, he said without preamble. She was protected. Lena's heart dropped. Protected by who? The investigator leaned in, lowering his voice. By someone who doesn't officially exist anymore. Jonathan felt the weight of the words settle. My father, he said. The investigator nodded. Or what's left of his network. Lena's breath caught. And they're still active, the investigator continued. Still operating. And now they know you're asking the right questions. Jonathan glanced toward the diner windows, suddenly aware of how exposed they were. The investigator slid a folded photo across the table. This was taken an hour ago, he said. Lena unfolded it. It showed her mother, Denise Williams, standing beside a vehicle Lena didn't recognize. Alive. And being watched. Lena looked up, her voice barely a whisper. They're moving her. The investigator nodded grimly. And if we don't move faster. He didn't finish the sentence. You didn't have to. Lena couldn't stop staring at the photo, even after the investigator pulled it back across the table. The diner's neon lights hummed softly above them, flickering like they were tired of witnessing secrets. A waitress refilled coffee nearby, oblivious to the fact that Lena's entire world had just tilted. She looks okay, Lena said finally. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. For now, the investigator replied. That photo was taken at a rest stop 2 counties over. Private road access. No cameras. Jonathan's fingers drummed once against the table, then stopped. You said she was being protected. That implies rules. Structures. Someone calling shots. Yes, the investigator said. And it also implies leverage. Lena's stomach tightened. Leverage over who? The investigator met her eyes. Over you. Or him. Or both. The words landed hard. Jonathan leaned back slightly, scanning the diner again. 2 truckers at the counter. A couple sharing fries. No one paying them any attention. And yet the feeling remained. Like a low buzz under the skin. Why show us this now? Jonathan asked. Why not keep her hidden? Because pressure works both ways, the investigator said. They want to see how you react. If you panic, if you make mistakes. Lena let out a shaky breath. So what do we do? The investigator hesitated. We don't chase them. Not yet. Jonathan raised an eyebrow. That's your plan? That's the smart one, he replied. Your father's old network doesn't play defense. They bait. If you rush in, you lose control. Lena pushed her coffee away untouched. Control of what? They have my mother. Yes, the investigator said gently. But they also want something. And they haven't asked for it yet. Jonathan's phone buzzed on the table. All three of them froze. Jonathan glanced at the screen. Unknown number. He didn't answer immediately. Let it ring, the investigator murmured. It stopped. Then a message came through. Unknown, you're asking questions that don't belong to you. Lena's chest tightened. They know. Jonathan typed calmly. Jonathan, then answer them. A response came almost instantly. Unknown, not here. Not yet. Jonathan locked the phone and slipped it back into his pocket. His expression didn't change, but something colder settled behind his eyes. They're confident, he said. That's a mistake. The investigator slid out of the booth. We should separate. For now. If they're watching, they'll expect you to stick together. Lena shook her head. No. I'm not leaving him. Jonathan looked at her. Lena. I already lost my mother once today, she said quietly. I'm not doing it again. The investigator studied them both, then nodded. Then we adjust. He scribbled an address on a napkin and slid it across. This is where I'll be in 2 hours. Don't come straight there. Take your time. Make it messy. And you? Jonathan asked. I'll give them something else to look at, the investigator said, standing. That's what I'm good at. He left without another word. They waited a full 5 minutes before moving. Outside, the air was cool and smelled like asphalt and rain that hadn't fallen yet. Jonathan didn't head straight for the car. Instead, he walked Lena past it, around the side of the diner, pretending to take a call. There's something I haven't told you, Jonathan said quietly. Lena looked at him. Now feels like the time. My father didn't just build a network, he said. He built contingencies. Safe houses. Protocols. People who only wake up when certain lines are crossed. And you crossed one, Lena said. Yes, Jonathan replied. The moment I let the police see that footage. They got into the car and drove off, taking the opposite direction of the highway. Lena watched the road blur past. If they're protecting her, why keep her moving? Because movement creates uncertainty, Jonathan said. And uncertainty keeps people obedient. Lena swallowed. My mother has never been obedient. Jonathan glanced at her. That's why she's still alive. They drove for nearly an hour, switching lanes, doubling back once, pulling into a grocery store parking lot just to leave again. Finally, Jonathan parked near a quiet residential street. We wait, he said. For what? For the ask. As if summoned, Jonathan's phone buzzed again. Unknown, your employee is safe. For now. Lena's breath caught. Unknown, safety requires cooperation. Jonathan typed slowly. Jonathan, say it. There was a pause. Longer this time. Unknown, you will step away from the foundation board. Effective immediately. Jonathan smiled faintly. There it is. Lena turned to him sharply. What foundation? The one my father funded in his name, Jonathan said. The one that still launders influence through charity. Unknown, you will also stop all inquiries related to Denise Williams. Lena grabbed Jonathan's arm. No. Jonathan didn't respond to the message right away. He stared out the windshield thinking. Then he typed. Jonathan, proof of life. Video. Today. Minutes passed. Lena's heart pounded so loudly she was sure it could be heard outside the car. Finally, a video came through. Denise sat in the back of a vehicle, hands free, eyes alert. She looked straight into the camera. "I'm okay," she said calmly. "Don't do anything reckless." The video ended. Lena pressed her hand to her mouth, tears spilling silently. Jonathan exhaled slowly. "They think they've cornered us," he said. "And have they?" Lena asked. Jonathan's gaze hardened. "No," he said. "They've reminded me who I used to be." His phone buzzed one more time. "Unknown, you have 48 hours. Jonathan locked the screen. "Then we start tonight," he said. Lena wiped her tears and nodded. Somewhere far away, Denise's car disappeared down another dark road. And the clock started ticking. Jonathan didn't sleep. He lay fully dressed on top of the bed in the small rental house, eyes open, listening to every sound the structure made as it cooled. Pipes clicked. Wind brushed the siding. Somewhere down the street, a dog barked once and went quiet. Lena sat at the small kitchen table, laptop open, hands wrapped around a mug she hadn't touched. The clock on the wall read 2:17 a.m. "You should rest," she said without turning around. Jonathan didn't move. "If I close my eyes, I start counting minutes." Lena nodded. She understood that feeling too well. It was the same feeling she'd had as a child when her mother worked nights and didn't come home on time. The house would grow louder with every tick of the clock. Shadows would stretch. Fear would invent explanations faster than logic could stop them. She closed the laptop. "I found something," she said quietly. Jonathan sat up. "What kind of something?" "The foundation," Lena said. "The one they want you off." Jonathan walked into the kitchen, pulling out the chair across from her. "I assumed you already knew about it." "I knew it existed," Lena said. "I didn't know what it really was." She slid the laptop back open and turned it toward him. "On paper, it funds housing initiatives, legal aid, food access, all good things." "And off paper?" Jonathan asked. "It's a quiet gatekeeper," Lena said. "Contracts routed through shell nonprofits. Donations tied to zoning approvals. Board members with ties to private security firms." Jonathan leaned back slowly. "My father called it influence insurance." Lena met his eyes. "Then stepping away from it doesn't just cost you power. It creates a vacuum." "Yes," Jonathan said. "And vacuums get filled." Lena's phone buzzed on the table. Both of them froze. She looked at the screen. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she answered. "Hello." A woman's voice came through. "Come." Almost bored. "You're difficult to track," the woman said. Lena's stomach dropped. "Who is this?" "You can call me Miss Cole," the voice replied. "I manage logistics." Jonathan leaned closer, listening. "Logistics for what?" Lena asked. "For people who don't want to be found," Miss Cole said. "Including your mother." Lena closed her eyes. "I want to speak to her." "That's not how this works," Miss Cole replied. "You've already been given reassurance." Jonathan took the phone from Lena gently. "You've also been given a request," he said. "And a deadline." "Yes," Miss Cole said. 42 hours left." Jonathan's voice stayed even. "You're asking me to dismantle something my father built over decades. That's not cooperation. That's surrender." Pause. "Your father is not relevant," Miss Cole said. "You are." Jonathan smiled faintly. "That's where you're wrong." Another pause. Longer this time. "We are not interested in philosophy," Miss Cole said. "We are interested in stability." Jonathan's smile disappeared. "Stability for who?" "For everyone who benefits from the current arrangement," she replied. "Including your employee's mother." Lena grabbed Jonathan's sleeve, shaking her head. Jonathan ignored it. "You moved her from a hospital," he said. "That narrows your resources. Hospitals ask questions. Private care costs money." "You're making assumptions," Miss Cole said. "No," Jonathan replied. "I'm reading patterns." The line went quiet. Then Miss Cole spoke again. You have a talent for antagonizing people who could make this very painful. Jonathan leaned forward. You already crossed that line. The call ended. Lena stared at the phone in his hand. That was a threat. That was a warning, Jonathan said. Threats come later. He handed the phone back to her. They're not a single group. Lena frowned. What do you mean? Logistics managers don't issue ultimatums unless they're juggling competing interests, Jonathan said. Someone above her wants compliance. Someone below her wants profit. And where does my mother fit into that? Lena asked. Jonathan hesitated. As leverage, and as a liability. Lena's chest tightened. They'd hurt her? They'd rather not, Jonathan said. It complicates things. But yes, if pushed. Silence settled between them. Finally Lena stood. Then we don't push blindly. Jonathan looked up. What are you thinking? My mother doesn't trust easily, Lena said. If she's calm in that video, it's because she's buying time. Which means she's noticed something. Jonathan's eyes sharpened. Like what? Like a routine, Lena said. A face that doesn't change. A stop that repeats. Jonathan nodded slowly. Movement leaves traces. And people get careless, Lena added. Especially when they think the clock is on their side. Jonathan checked his watch. Then we changed the clock. He reached into his bag and pulled out a slim folder. Inside were old names, handwritten notes, and a faded map marked with circles. My father's contingencies, he said. I hoped I'd never need these. Lena traced one of the circles with her finger. What happens if we use them? Jonathan met her gaze. Nothing stays quiet. Outside, a car passed slowly, headlights sweeping across the window. They both watched it until it disappeared. Somewhere else, Denise sat upright in the back of another moving vehicle, eyes fixed on the road ahead. She memorized the turns. She counted the stops. And she waited. The warehouse didn't look like anything worth remembering. That was the point. It sat between a closed upholstery shop and a chain self-storage facility on the outskirts of Tacoma, its windows filmed over with dust and neglect. No signage. No cameras visible from the street. Just a long, low building that blended into the background of forgotten places. Jonathan parked 3 blocks away and cut the engine. Why here? Lena asked quietly. Because it's one of the circles, Jonathan replied, tapping the folded map in his jacket. And because it hasn't been used in years. They walked the rest of the distance, keeping their pace casual. Lena's heart pounded with each step, but she forced herself to breathe evenly. She'd learned long ago that panic made noise even when you were silent. Inside, the warehouse smelled like oil and old cardboard. The lights flickered on with a low hum, revealing rows of empty shelves and a single metal table in the center. Someone was already there. He sat with his back to them, jacket draped over the chair, posture relaxed as if he were waiting for a late dinner reservation. Jonathan stopped. So, the man said without turning around, you finally came. Lena's breath caught. Jonathan stepped forward, his voice calm. You're early. The man chuckled softly. Or you're predictable. He turned. Gray hair. Weathered face. Eyes that missed nothing. Thomas Reed, Jonathan said. I thought you were retired. I was, Reed replied. Then your father died. Lena looked between them. Who is he? A fixer, Jonathan said. The kind you don't find on payrolls. Reed stood, extending a hand to Lena. You must be the maid. Lena didn't take it. My name is Lena. Reed smiled thinly. Of course it is. Jonathan's jaw tightened. Why are you here? Because someone lit a signal that hasn't been lit in a long time, Reed said, glancing at the folder under Jonathan's arm. And because Denise Williams is more important than you realize. Lena's stomach dropped. You know my mother. I know her file, Reed corrected. And I know why she disappeared. Jonathan's voice hardened. Then you also know she didn't walk away on her own. Reed nodded. No. She was extracted. By who? Lena demanded. Reed looked at her. By people who once worked for your father. People who believe they're cleaning up a mess he left behind. Jonathan laughed once, humorless. My father never left messes. Reed's eyes flicked to him. He left leverage. And leverage rots. Silence filled the warehouse. Lena stepped forward. My mother worked nights. She came home tired, not scared. Whatever you think she's tied to, she didn't choose it. Reed studied her for a moment. No, he said. She didn't. But she recognized it. Jonathan frowned. Recognized what? Reed reached into his pocket and pulled out a thin envelope, sliding it across the table. Jonathan opened it. Inside was a photocopy of an old incident report. A workplace injury. A construction site. Years ago. Lena leaned closer, reading the name. Her mother's. She was a witness, Reed said. To something that never made it into court. Lena's chest tightened. What are you saying? I'm saying your mother didn't disappear because of you, Reed said gently. She disappeared because she refused to forget. Jonathan closed the envelope slowly. And now, Reed said, the people who buried that incident are afraid the past is waking up. Lena shook her head. Then why ask Jonathan to step down from the foundation? Because the foundation is the lid, Reed replied. And once it opens, a lot of things crawl out. Jonathan met Reed's gaze. Including you. Reed smiled faintly. Especially me. A sound echoed from outside. Footsteps. More than one. Reed's expression shifted. They found this place faster than I expected. Lena's heart raced. Who? The same people who moved your mother, Reed said. And they're not here to talk. Jonathan snapped the folder shut. Then we leave. Reed shook his head. Not all of us. What do you mean? Lena asked. Reed reached into his pocket again, pulling out a small key and placing it in Lena's hand. This opens a locker at the Tacoma bus terminal. Inside is everything your mother hid before they took her. Lena stared at the key. Why give this to me? Because I won't get another chance, Reed said. And because your mother trusted that someone like you would come looking. The footsteps grew louder. Reed turned toward a side door. Go. Both of you. Jonathan hesitated. You're not coming? Reed smiled, already moving. Someone has to slow them down. Lena's throat tightened. You'll get hurt. Reed paused, glancing back. I've lived longer than I deserved. A door slammed. Jonathan grabbed Lena's hand and pulled her toward the opposite exit. As they ran, Lena clutched the key so tightly it cut into her palm. Behind them, voices echoed through the warehouse. And somewhere far away, Denise waited for the moment she could finally stop pretending not to be afraid. The bus terminal was never quiet, no matter the hour. Even at dawn, Tacoma Station hummed with movement. Engines idled. Luggage wheels rattled across concrete. Voices overlapped in half-sentences and goodbyes. The air smelled like diesel, burnt coffee, and rain-soaked coats. Lena kept her head down as she and Jonathan moved through the crowd. The key Reed had given her felt heavier than it should have, a small, solid reminder that nothing about this was abstract anymore. Locker 317 sat near the back wall, tucked between a vending machine that blinked error and a row of payphones no one used anymore. Lena knelt and slid the key in. For a second it wouldn't turn. Her breath caught. Easy, Jonathan murmured. Don't rush it. She tried again. The lock clicked open. Inside was a canvas backpack, faded navy blue, the zipper worn thin. Lena recognized it instantly. My mom carried this to work, she whispered. Every night. She pulled it out with shaking hands and unzipped it. Inside were notebooks. 3 of them. All identical. Along with a folded envelope and an old prepaid phone wrapped in a grocery receipt. Jonathan scanned the area. We shouldn't open this here. Lena nodded, zipping the bag again. I know. They didn't make it 10 steps before Jonathan stiffened. Don't turn around, he said quietly. Lena's pulse spiked. Why? Because the man leaning against the ticket kiosk isn't here to catch a bus. They kept walking, pace steady. Lena's instincts screamed at her to run, but she forced her feet to stay calm, controlled. Is he following? She asked under her breath. Yes. They exited through the side doors into the gray morning drizzle. Jonathan veered left, then right, leading them toward a parking garage across the street. Halfway there, Jonathan stopped abruptly and turned. Can I help you? He asked. The man smiled. Mid-30s. Clean jacket. Too alert. Just admiring your confidence, the man said. You don't look like someone who enjoys being watched. Jonathan returned the smile. I've gotten used to it. The man's eyes flicked to the backpack. That belongs to someone else. Lena stepped forward. It belongs to my mother. The man sighed like this was inconvenient. Then you should give it back. Jonathan's tone cooled. Or what? The man shrugged. Or we escalate. Rain began to fall harder, dotting the concrete between them. Jonathan glanced around. People nearby. Cars pulling in and out. Witnesses. Not here, Jonathan said. You know that. The man nodded. True. But soon. He stepped back, already losing interest. 48 hours is generous. Don't waste it. He walked away, disappearing into the flow of commuters. Lena's knees nearly buckled once he was gone. Jonathan caught her arm. We're not safe yet. I know, she said. But this, she clutched the backpack, this matters. They drove in silence to a quiet motel off the highway. The kind with thin curtains and carpet that smelled faintly of bleach and old smoke. Inside the room, Lena finally opened the backpack. The notebooks were filled edge to edge with her mother's handwriting. Dates, times, names, addresses, license plate numbers. Small observations written in the margins. She flipped through faster, her chest tightening with each page. She was tracking them, Lena whispered. For years. Jonathan leaned over her shoulder. These aren't random. Look at the repetition. Night routes, Lena said. Same vehicles. Same transfer points. She opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a photo. The photo showed Denise standing outside a construction site, hard hat in hand, talking to a man whose face had been crossed out with black marker. The paper held only one sentence, written carefully. If anything happens to me, it wasn't an accident. Lena pressed the paper to her chest. She knew, she said. She knew they'd come. Jonathan picked up the prepaid phone and powered it on. It buzzed immediately. One unread message. Unknown. If you're reading this, they've already moved me. Trust the quiet ones. Not the loud helpers. Lena covered her mouth, tears spilling silently. Jonathan's jaw clenched. She was planning her own disappearance. No, Lena said softly. She was planning for me. A knock sounded at the door. Both of them froze. Another knock. Firmer this time. Jonathan motioned for Lena to step back, then opened the door a crack. A woman stood outside. Early 40s. No badge. No smile. Miss Carter, she said calmly, eyes on Lena behind him. My name is Elaine Brooks. Jonathan stiffened. You shouldn't be here, he said. Elaine met his gaze evenly. Neither should you. She glanced down the hallway, then back at them. Your clock just got shorter. Lena felt the room tilt. Elaine lowered her voice. Because someone else is looking for your mother now. And they don't want leverage, she added. They want silence. Elaine didn't step inside the room. She stood just past the threshold, rain dampening the shoulders of her coat, eyes steady but tired in a way that suggested long nights and bad outcomes. Say that again, Lena said. Her voice was thin, controlled. Who wants silence? Elaine glanced down the hallway once more before answering. A private recovery firm contracted through intermediaries. They don't negotiate. They erase. Jonathan closed the door slowly but didn't lock it. You're not law enforcement. No, Elaine said. I used to be adjacent to it. Now I clean up the gaps. Lena folded her arms tight against her chest. Why tell us? Elaine's gaze softened just a fraction. Because your mother didn't deserve to vanish quietly. And because someone high up made a mistake. Jonathan leaned against the dresser. Which was? They assumed you'd panic, Elaine said. Instead, you followed the trail. She nodded toward the backpack on the bed. And you found what they hoped was lost. Lena stepped forward. If you know all this, then you know where my mother is. Elaine hesitated. I know where she was. 12 hours ago. Lena's breath caught. That's not good enough. I know, Elaine said quietly. That's why I'm here. Jonathan studied her. You could have tipped them instead. Yes, Elaine replied. And then I'd never sleep again. Silence filled the room. The hum of the motel's old air unit rattled like it was struggling to keep up. Elaine took a step inside at last. They moved your mother off the grid. Not hospitals. Not safe houses. Something mobile. A contractor vehicle, Jonathan said. Long hauls. Elaine nodded. With rotating drivers. Minimal stops. Lena felt dizzy. Then how do we find her? Elaine pointed to the notebooks. Your mother already gave you the map. You just haven't read it the way she intended. Lena sat on the edge of the bed, flipping one open again. These are just notes. No, Elaine said. They're patterns. Your mother didn't track people. She tracked behavior. Jonathan leaned in. Transfer windows. Yes, Elaine said. She marked the gaps. Places where oversight thins out. Lena's fingers stopped on a page circled twice in red ink. What about this? She asked. Elaine smiled faintly. That's the mistake. Jonathan straightened. A repeated stop. Every route changes, Elaine said. Except that one. Same rest area. Same time block. Lena looked up sharply. Why? Because someone got lazy, Elaine replied. Or sentimental. Jonathan checked his watch. When's the next window? Elaine exhaled. 6 hours. Lena stood abruptly. Then we go. Elaine's expression hardened. You don't understand. Once we move, this stops being leverage. It becomes a race. Jonathan met Lena's eyes. We've been racing since the night she didn't come home. Lena nodded. I'm not waiting. Elaine studied them both, then reached into her coat and pulled out a burner phone. Then you'll need this, she said, handing it to Lena. It's tapped. On purpose. Lena frowned. Why would we want that? Elaine's eyes flicked to the ceiling. Because the people listening think they're smarter than you. Let them. Jonathan smiled faintly. Bait. Elaine nodded. Exactly. She turned toward the door. I can't go with you. Lena's chest tightened. Why not? Because if I disappear now, Elaine said, they'll know where you went. Jonathan opened the door for her. Then what happens to you? Elaine paused. I do what I've always done. She met Lena's gaze. I stay just visible enough to be underestimated. The door closed behind her. For a moment, neither Lena nor Jonathan moved. Then Jonathan spoke. She's right. Lena nodded, already pulling on her jacket. I know. They packed quickly. The notebooks, the phone, the photo. As they stepped outside, Lena's phone buzzed. Unknown, you're running out of time. Lena typed back before Jonathan could stop her. Lena, so are you? They drove toward the highway, rain streaking across the windshield like the world was trying to blur itself out. Somewhere ahead, a rest area waited. And in the back of a moving vehicle, Denise felt the familiar slowing of the engine. She lifted her head. They were stopping again. Just like before. The rest area sat just beyond a curve in the highway, tucked behind a line of evergreens that muffled the sound of traffic. Sodium lights cast everything in a dull orange glow, the kind that made faces look unfamiliar and intentions harder to read. Jonathan slowed the car but didn't pull in. "Too clean," he said. Lena watched the lot through the windshield. Two semis idled near the far edge. A white utility van sat closer to the bathrooms, engine running. No logos. No plates on the front. "That's them," Lena whispered. Jonathan nodded. "Same configuration your mother marked. Same spacing." He drove past the entrance, heart thudding, then took the next exit and looped back on a service road that paralleled the highway. "We don't rush," he said. "We wait for the handoff." Lena's fingers dug into her knees. "What if they leave?" "They won't," Jonathan replied. "This stop matters to them." They parked behind a cluster of trees with a partial view of the lot. The rain had stopped, leaving the air thick and quiet. Minutes passed. Then a second vehicle pulled in. Dark sedan. Tinted windows. It parked beside the utility van. Jonathan leaned forward. There. Two men stepped out. No uniforms. No urgency. They moved like people who didn't expect resistance. Lena's pulse roared in her ears. "My mom is in that van." Jonathan didn't answer. He was watching the sedan. A third man emerged. Older. Careful. He said something the others listened to. "That's the supervisor," Jonathan said. Decisions flowed downhill from him. Lena's phone vibrated in her pocket. She pulled it out. Unknown number. Jonathan's jaw tightened. "They're listening." Lena answered anyway, putting it on speaker. "You're closer than you should be," the voice said calmly. "Mel." Measured. Jonathan leaned toward the phone. "Then stop moving her." Pause. "That's not an option," the voice replied. "You've already declined cooperation." Lena's chest burned. "You promised she was safe." "She is," the voice said. "As long as this remains orderly." Jonathan smiled without humor. "You're transferring custody." Another pause. Longer. "You're guessing," the voice said. "No," Jonathan replied. "I'm observing." Lena watched as the rear doors of the van opened. A woman stepped down slowly. Her breath caught. Even from this distance, she knew the shape of her mother's shoulders. The way she held herself upright even when tired. "Mom," Lena whispered. Denise stood between two men, hands free but close to her sides. She scanned the lot once, twice. Then her gaze flicked toward the trees. Straight toward them. Jonathan sucked in a breath. "She knows." Lena's vision blurred. "She's looking for me." On the phone, the voice sharpened. "You need to leave. Now." Jonathan spoke calmly. "You moved her into public space. That was your mistake." The voice lowered. "You don't understand what's at stake." Jonathan's eyes stayed on Denise. "I understand exactly." Denise shifted her weight, deliberately slow. She said something to the man beside her. He shook his head. She said it again. Louder. The older supervisor turned. "What is she doing?" Lena asked, panic rising. Jonathan's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. "She's forcing a delay." Denise took a step back. Then another. The supervisor reached for her arm. She pulled away. Lena gasped. "Mom, don't." Denise raised her voice. Not shouting. Projecting. "I need a restroom," she said clearly. A small thing. A human thing. People nearby looked over. The supervisor hesitated. "Granting it," Jonathan murmured. "They don't want attention." The phone crackled. "This ends if you walk away." Jonathan finally looked at Lena. "If we intervene now, it becomes violent." Lena's nails bit into her palm. "And if we don't?" "It becomes public," Jonathan said. "Which they fear more." Denise was escorted toward the restroom building. One man ahead. One behind. As they reached the door, Denise stumbled. Looked real. Convincing. She caught herself on the wall. The man behind her swore under his breath. The supervisor started toward them. Jonathan opened the car door. "Jonathan," Lena whispered. "We don't touch them," he said. "We change the environment." He stepped out, phone still connected. "You're losing control," Jonathan said into it. "Get back in the car," the voice snapped. Jonathan raised his voice slightly. "You chose this location. Cameras. Witnesses. You underestimated her." Denise disappeared into the restroom. Seconds stretched. The supervisor's head snapped up. He scanned the lot. His gaze brushed past the trees. Lena held her breath. Then Denise screamed. The sound cut through the rest area like a blade. People turned. A woman near the vending machines froze. A truck driver stepped down from his cab. "What did she do?" Lena whispered, terrified. Jonathan's face was pale. "She pulled the fire alarm." A piercing siren began to wail. Red lights flashed. The supervisor swore loudly. On the phone, the voice exploded. "You set us up." Jonathan hung up. "Now," he said. But before Lena could move, she saw it. One of the men reached inside his jacket. Not for a phone. For something else. And Denise was still inside. Jonathan moved before Lena could think. "Stay here," he said, already stepping out from the trees. "No," Lena whispered, grabbing his sleeve. "You said we don't touch them." "That was before he reached inside his jacket," Jonathan replied. His voice was calm, but his eyes were sharp. "This is where lines get crossed." The fire alarm continued to scream, drawing people out of bathrooms, cars, and trucks. Red lights flashed against wet pavement. Confusion spread fast, and confusion was dangerous. The man near the van froze when he saw Jonathan approach. "Stop right there," the man said, his hands still inside his jacket. Jonathan raised both hands slightly. "Not surrender. Positioning. Public space," Jonathan said clearly, loud enough for nearby people to hear. "Cameras. Witnesses. Whatever you're about to do will be remembered." The man's eyes flicked around. A trucker was filming with his phone. A couple stood frozen near the vending machines. Someone shouted that the fire department was on the way. From the restroom, Denise's voice rang out again. "Help. Someone help me." Lena's chest felt like it was collapsing. She stepped out too, unable to stay hidden another second. "Mom," she yelled. Denise emerged from the restroom doorway, one hand pressed to her side, breathing hard. A guard hovered too close behind her, trying to steer her back. "No," Denise said loudly. "I want to sit down." The supervisor snapped, "Get her back in the van." The moment stretched. Then sirens sounded in the distance. Not close yet, but close enough to change everything. The man by the van swore and finally pulled his hand out of his jacket. It wasn't a weapon. It was a radio. Jonathan didn't relax. "Too late," he said. "You lost control." The supervisor's face hardened. "This isn't over." Denise saw Lena then. Really saw her. Her posture changed instantly. The fatigue vanished, replaced by something fierce and alert. "Lena," Denise said, her voice steady despite the chaos. "You shouldn't be here." Lena ran to her and wrapped her arms around her mother, holding on like the ground might disappear. Denise hugged her back just as tightly, fingers digging into her jacket. "I knew you'd follow the notes," Denise whispered. "I hoped you wouldn't." Tears streamed down Lena's face. "They took you." Denise pulled back slightly, her expression serious. "No. They interrupted me." The supervisor stepped forward. "This reunion is touching, but—" Jonathan cut him off. "You're done." The man laughed once. "You think because alarms are ringing we just vanish?" "Yes," Jonathan said. "That's exactly what you do." The sirens were louder now. Red and blue lights flashed at the edge of the highway. The supervisor's jaw clenched. He looked at Denise, then at Lena. "This ends badly if you keep digging," he said quietly. Denise met his gaze without fear. "It already ended badly. You're just late to accept it." The supervisor turned sharply and motioned to his team. "We're leaving." They moved fast. The sedan pulled out first, tires hissing on wet asphalt. The utility van followed seconds later, merging back onto the highway like nothing had happened. Fire trucks and patrol cars rolled in moments later. Questions followed. Statements. A lot of confusion. Jonathan spoke to the officers calmly, carefully, choosing his words. Denise was taken aside, wrapped in a blanket, checked for injuries. She insisted she was fine. Lena stayed close, afraid that if she let go, someone would take her mother again. Nearly an hour later, they sat in the back of an ambulance parked at the edge of the lot. The chaos had faded, replaced by paperwork and flashing lights. Denise finally exhaled. "You shouldn't have come," she said softly. Lena shook her head. "You left me breadcrumbs." Denise smiled faintly. "I hoped you'd be smart enough to find them and stubborn enough to ignore the warnings." Jonathan leaned against the open ambulance door. "They're not done." "I know," Denise said. "That's why I didn't want you involved." Lena frowned. "Involved in what?" Denise looked at Jonathan, then back at Lena. "In something that started years ago," Denise said. "Something I thought I could outwait." Jonathan's voice was low. "The incident." Denise nodded. "I saw things I wasn't supposed to. I wrote them down. I kept copies. I stayed quiet. And they still came," Lena said. "Yes," Denise replied. "Because silence only works until someone decides it's inconvenient." A police officer approached. "Ma'am, we're going to need you to come with us for a formal statement." Denise stood slowly. She squeezed Lena's hand. "This isn't over." Lena swallowed. "Are they going to protect you?" Denise gave a sad smile. "Protection is temporary." Jonathan straightened. "Then we make the truth permanent." Denise looked at him, searching his face. "You understand what that means?" "Yes," Jonathan said. "Everything comes out." Denise nodded once. "Good." As she walked toward the patrol car, Lena felt the fear return, not sharp this time but heavy. They had won a moment. But moments didn't end wars. And somewhere, someone was already deciding how to respond. The statement at the police station dragged longer than Lena expected. Forms, fingerprints, repeated questions. Denise answered each calmly, her voice steady, though her eyes flicked around the room as if scanning for someone invisible. Jonathan stood beside Lena, leaning against the wall with arms crossed. He had learned to read Denise like a map, every small twitch, every glance, every pause, because those were the real indicators of threat. Lena tried not to fidget, tried to focus on Denise's calm composure, but her mind was racing. Every time she looked at her mother, she felt a mix of awe and frustration. Denise had faced danger for years, quietly, alone. Lena had been out there following breadcrumbs, jumping at every shadow, and still, her mother had been the one holding the strings. After what felt like an eternity, the officer finally nodded. "That should be sufficient for now. We'll call if we need anything else." Denise exhaled slowly, leaning back against the table. "Thank you," she said, her voice quieter this time. "I know this isn't what you wanted for your day." Lena shook her head. "It's not about me. It's about you being safe." Jonathan looked at them both, the tension in his shoulders barely noticeable. "Safety isn't a guarantee," he said. "It's a moving target. And we just ticked a few boxes on someone else's radar." Denise's eyes met his. "Then we adjust." The drive back was quiet. Lena held the backpack on her lap like a shield. Each notebook felt heavy, loaded with years of secrets and careful documentation. They had the tools now, but the questions remained. Who else knew, who else was watching, and what would happen next? As they pulled into the driveway of Jonathan's house, Lena noticed the gates slightly ajar. Something was off. Jonathan didn't immediately get out of the car. He scanned the perimeter with a practiced eye. "They've been here," he said finally. "But they left fast." Lena's heart sank. "How do you know?" "Footprints," Jonathan said, pointing to soft impressions in the flower beds near the gate. Careful. Not a break-in. Just a message. Denise stiffened. A warning. Jonathan nodded. Exactly. They entered the house cautiously. The usual warmth of the living room felt distant, almost hollow. Jonathan flipped on the lights, scanning every corner. Nothing seemed moved. Nothing seemed out of place. Yet the air felt heavier. Mom, Lena said softly, turning to Denise. Do you want to rest? Denise shook her head. No. We need to talk. Jonathan gestured to the kitchen table. Then talk we shall. Denise pulled out one of the notebooks, flipping through the carefully organized pages. I documented everything for a reason, she said. Not just the incident itself, but the networks, the routines, the people who kept moving silently around me. Lena leaned in, scanning the pages. Names, addresses, license plates, timestamps. Each entry precise, methodical. All of this, how did you do it? I learned to watch, Denise said. And a plan. I knew that one day someone would need to pick up the pieces. Jonathan tapped his fingers on the table. And that someone is us. Denise nodded. Yes, but not blindly. We follow the patterns, the windows, the gaps. That's how you stay ahead of people who believe they can erase you. Lena swallowed, the weight of responsibility pressing down. And if they try again? They will, Denise said simply. They always do. But now we have the advantage. Knowledge is power, and I've given you mine. A sudden sound outside made all three of them tense. A soft shuffle against the gate. Jonathan moved toward the window. Too early, he muttered. They shouldn't be back yet. Lena peeked alongside him, heart racing. A shadow slipped past the trees near the property line. Someone watching, waiting. Not moving in, just observing. Jonathan's jaw tightened. They've changed tactics. Denise's expression hardened. Good. Let them. Lena turned to him, eyes wide. What do you mean? Jonathan's voice was low, calm, but edged with danger. They think fear will control us. They haven't realized that now we act with intent, not reaction. Denise leaned closer to Lena. This is the first time I've been able to do more than survive. Now we can take initiative. Outside, the shadow paused. Head tilted slightly as if calculating. Then it disappeared back into the darkness. Jonathan exhaled slowly. This isn't over. Not by a long shot. Denise nodded. And it won't be until the people who orchestrated this know they picked the wrong family to target. Lena looked at both of them. Then we keep moving. Together. Jonathan's eyes met hers. Together. Somewhere in the night beyond the gates, someone was already taking note of their movements. But this time they were prepared. And the clock that had haunted them for days now ticked with purpose. Not threat. Strategy. Because survival was no longer enough. They were planning the next move. Morning arrived without relief. The sky was pale and overcast, the kind of gray that made time feel suspended. Lena stood at the kitchen sink, watching condensation slide down the glass as the coffee maker gurgled behind her. She hadn't slept. Every creak of the house had sounded like a footstep. Every passing car had felt deliberate. Jonathan sat at the table with Denise, the notebooks spread between them like pieces of a puzzle that refused to lie flat. They didn't come back, Jonathan said quietly. That's intentional. Denise nodded. They want us uneasy. Waiting burns energy. Lena turned. So we stop waiting. Jonathan looked up. Exactly. He slid one notebook toward Denise. You marked a secondary chain here. Not the main routes. Something smaller. Denise adjusted her glasses and studied the page. I never followed it directly. Too risky. But it kept surfacing whenever money moved quietly. Lena leaned over her shoulder. This address, Seattle? Yes, Denise said. An accounting office. Clean. Legitimate on the surface. Jonathan's mouth tightened. Front-facing compliance. What does that mean? Lena asked. It means paper trails, Jonathan replied. And paper trails mean leverage. Before Denise could respond, Jonathan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen, then set it face down. Who was that? Lena asked. Jonathan didn't answer immediately. Someone who shouldn't be reaching out yet. Denise's posture stiffened. That's not good. Jonathan finally turned the phone over so they could see. Unknown, we need to talk. Before this gets out of hand. Lena scoffed. It's already out of hand. Jonathan typed calmly. Jonathan, you already made it public. A response came almost immediately. Unknown, not like this. Denise leaned closer. That's fear. Jonathan nodded. Which means someone else is losing control. Another message followed. Unknown, meet me. Alone. Jonathan smiled faintly. They always say that. Lena grabbed his arm. No. You don't go alone. I won't, Jonathan said. But I'll let them think I will. Denise closed the notebook slowly. You're baiting them. Yes, Jonathan said. And they'll take it. Because they believe I'm still playing defense. Lena swallowed. What if you're wrong? Jonathan met her eyes. Then they exposed themselves trying to correct me. Denise stood. I'm coming too. Jonathan shook his head. Not this time. Denise's voice sharpened. You don't get to decide that. I do, Jonathan replied gently. Because if they see you, they scatter. If they think you're still hidden, they talk. Lena looked between them, fear and resolve twisting together. Then what do I do? Jonathan paused. You listen. He handed her a small earpiece. If anything feels off, you say it. Lena hesitated, then took it. Don't be a hero. Jonathan smiled slightly. I don't plan to be. The meeting place was a quiet cafe near the waterfront. Glass walls. Open seating. Too many witnesses for violence. Exactly the kind of place people chose when they wanted control without chaos. Jonathan arrived first and took a seat with his back to the window. Minutes later, a man approached. Mid-50s. Expensive coat. Careful eyes. Mr. Hale, the man said, extending a hand. Jonathan didn't take it. You contacted me. The man smiled thinly and Saturday, I'm here to prevent damage. Damage to who? Jonathan asked. To everyone, the man replied. Including you. Jonathan leaned back. You moved my employee's mother. You threatened her. You don't get to play mediator. The man's smile faded. That wasn't my call. Jonathan's eyes sharpened. Then whose was it? Pause. People above both of us, the man said. And people below who don't care about consequences. Jonathan nodded slowly. So you're being squeezed. The man exhaled. We all are. In Lena's ear, Jonathan's voice came through softly. He's nervous. Her reply was barely a whisper. He should be. The man leaned in. This can still be contained. Jonathan's voice hardened. You don't contain truth. You bury it. And that never lasts. You don't understand what exposure would trigger, the man snapped quietly. Contracts. Careers. Entire systems. Jonathan met his gaze. Then they should have thought about that before taking someone's mother. The man's jaw clenched. What do you want? Jonathan didn't answer right away. I want accountability, he said finally. Names. Documents. Not apologies. The man laughed bitterly. That would destroy people. Yes, Jonathan replied evenly. That's the point. Silence stretched between them. Then the man spoke quieter now. If I give you something small, will you pause? Jonathan leaned forward. No. The man stiffened. Then this ends badly. Jonathan stood. It already did. You just haven't accepted it yet. As Jonathan walked out, Lena's heart pounded. Jonathan, she whispered into the earpiece. Someone just stood up behind him. Jonathan's pace didn't change. Tell me, he said calmly. A woman, Lena said. She's on the phone. Watching you leave. Jonathan exhaled slowly. Good. Good? Lena whispered. Yes, Jonathan replied. Because that means the real conversation hasn't happened yet. Behind him, through the cafe glass, the man watched Jonathan walk away, hands trembling just enough to betray the truth. This wasn't containment anymore. It was collapse. And someone somewhere was about to make a desperate move. The first sign came just after midnight. Not a call. Not a threat. A withdrawal. Jonathan noticed it while sitting in the darkened study, laptop open, the house quiet except for the low hum of the refrigerator down the hall. Numbers shifted on the screen, small movements buried in routine transactions. The kind most people never saw. But Jonathan saw them. They're pulling funds, he said quietly. Lena, curled on the couch with a blanket she hadn't needed hours ago, sat up. Pulling where? Everywhere, Jonathan replied. Short-term accounts. Shell nonprofits. Legal buffers. Denise stepped closer, peering at the screen. That's not damage control. No, Jonathan said. That's flight. Lena's chest tightened. They're running? They're trying to, Jonathan said. But you can't quietly move that much weight without making noise. As if summoned, Lena's burner phone buzzed. She didn't answer immediately. Jonathan looked at her. Speaker. Lena nodded and accepted the call. You've caused instability, a familiar male voice said. Calm but thinner now. This wasn't supposed to happen. Lena spoke before Jonathan could. Then you shouldn't have taken my mother. Pause. Your mother created this, the voice replied. By refusing to stay invisible. Denise closed her eyes, a small breath escaping her nose. They always say that. Jonathan leaned closer to the phone. You're hemorrhaging assets. Another pause. Longer. You think exposure gives you leverage, the voice said. It doesn't. It makes you a target. Jonathan's voice was steady. We already were. Silence stretched until Lena wondered if the call had dropped. Then the voice returned sharper. There's a file. It never made it into official archives. If it surfaces, people go to prison. Denise's eyes snapped open. Jonathan's fingers stilled on the keyboard. Where? The soft laugh. You don't get to demand terms. Jonathan smiled faintly. I do when your money starts running scared. The voice exhaled. You're underestimating how far this goes. Denise stepped forward. No, she said clearly. You're underestimating how long I watched you. The line went dead. Lena lowered the phone slowly. That was it. Jonathan shook his head. That was a warning disguised as a confession. Denise folded her arms. They're deciding who to sacrifice. Jonathan nodded. And whoever it is won't go quietly. An hour later, the news alert came through. Lena gasped. Jonathan, look. The headline scrolled across the screen. Private consulting firm under federal review following whistleblower complaint. Jonathan read it once. Then again. That's not us, Lena said. No, Jonathan replied. That's someone panicking. Denise sat heavily in a chair. They're trying to get ahead of it. Frame the narrative. Which means, Jonathan said, someone leaked something incomplete. Lena frowned. Incomplete? Yes, Jonathan replied. Enough to draw attention. Not enough to reveal the whole structure. Denise's mouth tightened. They're buying time. Jonathan stood. Then we take it away. He pulled a flash drive from the desk drawer and placed it on the table. Lena stared at it. What's that? Jonathan hesitated. Just a fraction. My father's final contingency. Denise looked at him sharply. You said you hoped you'd never need those. I did, Jonathan said. But hope doesn't stop rot. Lena swallowed. What's on it? Everything that connects the foundation, the contractors, the incident you witnessed, Jonathan said. Names that were never meant to be spoken together. Denise's voice was quiet. If that goes public, There's no walking it back, Jonathan finished. Lena felt a chill. And you've been sitting on this? Jonathan met her eyes. I wanted to believe the system could correct itself. Denise stood slowly. It never does. Jonathan plugged the drive into the laptop. The files populated instantly. Lena scanned the first document and felt her breath leave her lungs. Familiar names. New ones. Patterns snapping into place with sickening clarity. This is bigger than my mother, she whispered. Yes, Jonathan said. And that's why they took her. She wasn't the center. She was the proof. Outside, headlights swept briefly across the windows. All three of them froze. Jonathan closed the laptop halfway. We're not alone. Denise moved to the window, peering through the curtain. 2 vehicles. Parked wrong. Lena's pulse spiked. Are they coming in? Jonathan checked his phone. No messages. No calls. That's worse, he said. A knock sounded at the door. Not loud. Not threatening. Measured. Deliberate. Jonathan held up a hand, signaling silence. The knock came again. This is Agent Miller, a voice called out. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Lena's knees nearly gave out. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly, then opened them. Denise looked at him. Is this real? Jonathan's jaw tightened. Yes. And? Lena whispered. And, Jonathan said quietly, we're exactly where they don't want us anymore. He walked to the door. Behind it waited either protection or the final escalation. And the truth was about to step into the room. The agents didn't rush in. That was the first thing Lena noticed. No shouting. No hands on holsters. Just calm footsteps and the faint creak of the door as Jonathan opened it wider. Jonathan Hale, the man said, holding up his badge. Special Agent Miller. This is Agent Ruiz. 2 agents. Neutral posture. Professional eyes that missed nothing. Jonathan stepped aside. You're late. Agent Miller raised an eyebrow. That usually isn't the reaction we get. You usually arrive before people start bleeding money, Jonathan replied. Ruiz glanced past him, taking in Lena and Denise, the half-closed laptop, the tension thick enough to taste. May we come in? Jonathan hesitated only a second, then nodded. The door closed behind them with a soft click that sounded far louder than it should have. Agent Miller spoke first. We're not here to arrest anyone. Lena let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. But, Miller continued, we are here because several federal agencies just tripped over the same name within a 10-minute window. That name is yours. Jonathan crossed his arms. Which one? Miller smiled thinly. Exactly. Denise stepped forward. If you're here to scare us into silence, you're late. Ruiz looked at her with mild surprise. You're Denise Carter. Denise's chin lifted. I didn't hide very well. No, Ruiz said. You disappeared efficiently. Jonathan gestured toward the study. If you're going to hover, at least sit. Miller studied him for a moment, then nodded. They followed him inside. The laptop was still open. The flash drive still plugged in. Miller's eyes flicked to it. Is that what I think it is? Jonathan didn't answer. Lena did. It's the reason you're here. Silence settled again, heavier now. Ruiz spoke softly. Miss Carter, your statement from 15 years ago was flagged this morning. Not by us. Denise's lips pressed together. By who? Someone who wanted us looking in the wrong direction, Ruiz replied. Jonathan leaned forward. They're leaking fragments. Miller nodded. Sloppy ones. Lena's heart pounded. What does that mean for my mother? Miller's gaze shifted to her, and for the first time, something human crossed his face. Regret. Or maybe frustration. It means, he said carefully, someone moved her before we could. The room seemed to tilt. Moved her where? Lena asked. We don't know, Ruiz said. But we know she was alive 6 hours ago. Lena grabbed the edge of the desk. Alive. The word echoed, fragile and sharp. Jonathan's voice was low. You let them take her. Miller didn't flinch. We didn't know she existed until tonight. Denise laughed once, bitter. That's always the excuse. Jonathan straightened. Then this ends now. He turned the laptop fully toward the agents. Miller exhaled slowly. If you give us that, you burn every bridge you have left. Jonathan nodded. Good. Lena stared at the screen. Names scrolled past like ghosts finally stepping into light. Politicians, judges, executives. The scale of it made her stomach turn. Ruiz swallowed. This is extensive. It's exhaustive, Jonathan corrected. And verified. Miller looked at him sharply. Your father built this? Yes, Jonathan said. And then he buried it. Why unearth it now? Jonathan glanced at Lena. Because they crossed a line they can't uncross. Miller nodded slowly. If we take this, it doesn't stop tonight. I know, Jonathan said. It accelerates. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. Not close, but not far either. Ruiz's phone buzzed. He checked it, his expression tightening. They've arrested a fall guy. Denise scoffed. Already? A mid-level contractor, Ruiz said. They're framing him as the architect. Jonathan shook his head. Classic misdirection. Lena's voice trembled. And my mother? Miller met her eyes. She's leverage. The word hit harder than any threat. Jonathan closed the laptop and pulled out the flash drive. He placed it in Miller's open hand. Miller looked down at it, then back up. Once this enters evidence, you lose control. Jonathan smiled faintly. I never had it. The house lights flickered. Just once. Then again. Denise stiffened. Power surge. Jonathan checked his phone. No signal. Miller's jaw tightened. That's not coincidence. Outside, engines started. Multiple. Too many. Ruiz moved toward the window. That's not our team. Lena's breath hitched. Then who? A sharp crack echoed through the house. Glass shattered in the front room. Miller drew his weapon. Down? They dropped instinctively. Another crack. Closer. Jonathan grabbed Lena's arm, pulling her behind the desk. Denise pressed flat against the wall, eyes wide but focused. This is escalation, Ruiz muttered. Miller spoke into his radio. Nothing but static. They know we're here, Lena whispered. Jonathan's voice was grim. They always did. From outside, a voice called out through a megaphone. Jonathan Hale, it boomed. You've made a very public mistake. Lena's heart slammed against her ribs. Miller looked at Jonathan. They're not here for arrests. Jonathan nodded slowly. They're here to erase the ending. And somewhere in a place Lena still couldn't see, her mother was listening, waiting for the next move. The night ended without sirens. That was the detail Lena would remember later. Not the broken glass. Not the megaphone. But the silence that followed. It took 3 hours before the perimeter shifted. 3 hours of careful movement, coded phone calls routed through favors Jonathan hadn't wanted to use, and a quiet evacuation that never made the news. By the time dawn began to pale the sky, the house stood empty, lights off, as if nothing extraordinary had happened there at all. They regrouped in a windowless federal safe site an hour outside the city. Concrete walls. Fluorescent lights that hummed softly. Coffee that tasted burned no matter how much cream was added. Lena sat alone at the metal table, hands wrapped around the paper cup. Her reflection stared back from the steel surface, eyes darker than she remembered them being. Alive. 6 hours ago. The words still echoed. Agent Miller entered without ceremony and sat across from her. He looked older in this light. Less like authority. More like a tired man carrying too many files in his head. We located her, he said. Lena's grip tightened. Where? Miller didn't answer right away. She was moved through a private medical transport company. Chalon. Clean records. No flags until tonight. And now, she's no longer on U.S. soil. The room felt suddenly smaller. Jonathan stepped in behind Miller. He didn't sit. He rested his hands on the back of Lena's chair, grounding but heavy. Canada, Miller continued. Outside Vancouver. A long-term care facility that doesn't officially exist. Denise let out a slow breath from the corner of the room. They kept her close. That's arrogance. Or confidence, Jonathan said. Lena stood. You said she was alive. Past tense? Miller met her eyes. She is alive. The relief hit so hard her knees almost buckled. Jonathan's hands tightened, steadying her. But, Miller added gently, she's been awake longer than we thought. Lena frowned. What do you mean? She remembers, Miller said. More than anyone realized. Jonathan stiffened. How do you know that? Miller slid a thin file across the table. Inside were transcripts. Medical notes. Interview fragments recorded without consent. Lena's eyes scanned the page. She's been asking questions, Miller said. Names, dates, accounts. Denise whispered, she was never just a witness. Jonathan closed his eyes briefly. She was an auditor. That was the second twist Lena hadn't seen coming. My mother cleaned houses, Lena said hoarsely. She also balanced ledgers, Jonathan replied. She helped my father hide money, and then tracked where it went. Miller nodded. She figured out the pattern before anyone else did. That's why they didn't kill her. Why let her live at all? Lena asked. Because, Denise said softly, she remembered where things were buried. Silence settled again, but this time it wasn't fear. It was clarity. Jonathan straightened. Then we don't negotiate. Miller studied him. That's not how this ends cleanly. It doesn't end cleanly, Jonathan said. It ends truthfully. 3 days later, the first domino fell. Not publicly. Quietly. A bank in Delaware froze accounts tied to a trust that had never existed on paper. A judge in Oregon recused himself from every case he'd touched in the last decade. A senator canceled a fundraiser and disappeared from the schedule without explanation. The media noticed the pattern before they named it. Lena watched from a small apartment overlooking the harbor, news playing softly in the background. Jonathan stood near the window, phone pressed to his ear, voice low and precise. Denise sat at the table, assembling documents with the calm of someone who had waited years for this moment. Miller's call came just after midnight. We have her, he said. Lena didn't speak. She couldn't. She asked for you, Miller continued. She said you'd know what to bring. Lena swallowed. What did she say? Miller hesitated. She said, tell my daughter I kept my promise. The reunion happened quietly. No cameras. No speeches. Her mother looked smaller, frilier. But her eyes were sharp, and when she smiled, it was the same smile Lena remembered from childhood nights waiting for the bus that never came on time. I didn't disappear, her mother whispered. I stayed so you wouldn't have to. Justice didn't arrive as a single moment. It came in waves. Indictments. Confessions. Resignations that read like apologies without names attached. Jonathan testified for 3 days. Denise for 5. Lena never did. She didn't need to. Months later, when the story finally broke in full, it wasn't about a billionaire or a scandal. It was about a woman who worked nights, who noticed numbers that didn't add up, and who refused to forget what she'd seen. If this story stayed with you, if it made you feel something real, take a moment to support stories like this by liking, subscribing, and sharing your thoughts below. Someone out there is still waiting to be heard. And sometimes, all it takes is one voice refusing to stay silent.